Dr. Ethan Carter moved with purpose through the bustling halls of St. Mary's Hospital. The familiar sounds of beeping machines and hushed conversations, creating a symphony of urgency that surrounded him. He was a renowned pediatric surgeon, celebrated not only for his skill, but for the compassion he extended to every child he treated. With a warm smile and a gentle touch, he had built a rapport with his young patients, who often looked to him with wide, trusting eyes, unburdened by the harsh realities of their conditions. As he entered the pediatric ward, he found himself greeted by the excited squeals of children playing in the playroom. Laughter echoed off the walls, momentarily drowning out the sterile smell of antiseptic that clung to the air. Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had dedicated his life to medicine. He was about to check on his patient, a little boy named Max, who had just undergone a routine surgery. As he approached the room, he spotted the boy's mother, a weary but hopeful figure sitting by her son's bedside. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Ethan greeted her with a reassuring smile. "How's Max doing today?" "Oh, Dr. Carter, he's been asking for you," she replied, her eyes lighting up with relief. "He wanted to know when he could go home." Ethan chuckled softly, his heart warmed by the boy's eagerness. "Let's take a look at him, shall we?" He stepped into the room, where Max lay propped up on pillows, his cheeks flushed and eyes sparkling with excitement. "Dr. Carter, can I go home today?" he asked, his voice a mix of hope and impatience. Ethan bent down to meet the boy's gaze, his expression serious yet kind. "Let's see how you're feeling first, buddy. If you're doing well and the nurses give us the green light, I think we can make that happen." As he examined Max, Ethan was struck by the boy's resilience. It reminded him of why he became a doctor in the first place. He had always believed in the intrinsic value of every child, regardless of their circumstances. In that moment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that his work was not just a job, it was a calling. Later that evening, after a long day filled with surgeries and consultations, Ethan found himself wandering the hospital's quiet corridors, reflecting on the day's events. He paused by a window overlooking the city, the skyline twinkling against the twilight sky. The view was breathtaking, but his heart was heavy with a thought that had been nagging at him for weeks. In the past few months, he had encountered a growing number of families who could not afford the medical care their children desperately needed. It was a harsh reality that often left him feeling helpless. One particular case weighed heavily on his mind, a young girl named Lily, who had been diagnosed with a severe heart condition. The news of her condition had spread quickly, and her family was in despair. They were impoverished, and the cost of the surgery she needed was beyond their reach. Ethan had visited Lily in the hospital several times, each visit deepening his connection to her. She was a bright light in the somber atmosphere of the pediatric ward, always smiling despite her condition. Her laughter was infectious, and her spirit indomitable. Yet beneath that facade, Ethan could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty of her future. That night, after hours of contemplation, Ethan made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would perform Lily's surgery for free. He understood the risks involved, hospital policies, potential repercussions from the administration. But the thought of leaving Lily without the care she needed was unbearable. He would find a way to help her, no matter the cost. The next day, as Ethan prepared for his morning rounds, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending change. He entered Lily's room with a confident smile, determined to share the news that would change her life. "Good morning, Lily," he greeted, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "Dr. Carter," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Are you here to tell me I can go home?" Ethan chuckled, his heart swelling at her optimism. "Not quite yet, but I have some good news. I want to help you, Lily. I'm going to perform your surgery, and it's going to be free." Her expression transformed from confusion to disbelief, and then to joy. "Really? You'll help me? But why?" "Because every child deserves a chance at life, and you are just as deserving as anyone else," he replied, his voice steady and sincere. "I believe in you, and I want to give you that chance." Lily's smile was radiant, but Ethan noticed a flicker of worry in her eyes, as if she were concerned about how this would affect him. "But what about your job? What if they get mad?" "I'll figure it out," he assured her, a surge of determination coursing through him. "What matters most is you." Now, word of Ethan's decision spread quickly through the hospital, and he found himself facing whispers and sidelong glances from colleagues and staff. He knew he was stepping into dangerous territory, but his heart was resolute. He had always believed that the system should prioritize patient care over profit. He had dedicated his life to this calling, and he refused to turn his back on it now. But it was not long before his actions caught the attention of the hospital administration. Days later, he received a summons to meet with Dr. Margaret Evans, the hospital's director, a formidable woman known for her no-nonsense approach and unwavering dedication to the hospital's bottom line. As he entered her office, Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The air was thick with tension, and he could sense the unspoken judgments hanging in the air. Dr. Evans looked up from her desk, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Carter," she said, her tone icy, "we need to talk about your recent decision regarding patient care." Ethan squared his shoulders, ready to defend his actions. "I did what I believed was right, Dr. Evans. Lily deserves a chance at life, just like every other child. While I understand your passion, you must realize that you violated hospital policy. Providing care without compensation is unacceptable and sets a dangerous precedent," she replied, her voice steady, but laced with disapproval. Ethan felt his resolve waver as he listened to her words. "But it's not just about the policy, it's about the children. Lily's life is at stake." "Your compassion is admirable, but this is a business, Dr. Carter. We cannot afford to lose money on cases like this. It's not personal, it's just how the system works," she said, her tone dismissive. "Then the system is broken," he shot back, frustration rising within him. "We're supposed to be healing people, not turning them away because they can't pay. I refuse to be a part of that." Dr. Evans's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You need to understand the consequences of your actions. If you continue down this path, you will face serious repercussions." Ethan felt his heart race, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always prided himself on standing up for what was right, but now he felt the looming threat of losing everything he had worked for. "Then I'll take those consequences," he replied, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I won't abandon Lily or any child who needs help." As he left her office, Ethan's mind raced with anxiety and determination. He knew he was entering uncharted territory, but he was prepared to fight for what he believed in. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would test his ethics, challenge his beliefs, and change the course of his life forever. Ethan sat at the long oak table in the conference room, the air thick with tension and unspoken judgments. The board members of St. Mary's Hospital surrounded him, their faces a mix of skepticism and indifference. He had rehearsed his speech 1,000 times, but now, with their eyes boring into him, he felt his resolve waver. "Dr. Carter," began Dr. Evans, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "you've been brought here today to explain your actions regarding the surgery you performed on Lily Parsons, without hospital authorization or compensation. Can you justify your decision?" Ethan swallowed hard, his heart racing. "Every child deserves a chance at life, Dr. Evans. Lily's family was in dire need. How could I stand by while a child suffered? It's not just about policies, it's about compassion." "Compassion?" Dr. Evans shot back, her tone laced with derision. "Compassion doesn't pay the bills. Our hospital can't survive by giving away services. You've jeopardized not just your career, but the hospital's finances and reputation." Ethan felt a spark of anger ignite within him. What about the parents who can't afford treatment? Are we really going to turn our backs on them because of profit margins? We took an oath to help the sick, not just those who can pay. A murmur rippled through the board members, but Dr. Evans remained unmoved. "Your idealism is commendable, but this is the real world. We have policies for a reason, to protect the integrity of our institution. You violated those policies, and there are consequences." Ethan glanced around the table, noticing the faces of his colleagues, some nodding in quiet agreement, others looking away in discomfort. This was not just about him. It was about a system that prioritized money over humanity. "I cannot apologize for saving a child's life," he declared, his voice steady. If that's what it means to violate policy, then maybe those policies need to change. Your passion is noted, but it doesn't change the fact that you acted unilaterally, Dr. Evans said, her eyes narrowing. We will deliberate and inform you of our decision. As Ethan left the room, he felt a mixture of hope and dread swirling within him. He had spoken his truth, but what would it cost him? The weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders as he walked the sterile halls of St. Mary's, each step echoing with uncertainty. A few days later, the verdict arrived. Ethan stood in the same conference room, this time with a knot in his stomach. The board members were all seated, their expressions grave. Dr. Evans cleared her throat, and in that moment, time seemed to stretch indefinitely. Dr. Carter, she began, the board has reached a decision regarding your actions. Effective immediately, you are terminated from your position at St. Mary's Hospital. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow, and for a moment, he could only stare in disbelief. You can't be serious, he stammered, glancing around the room for any sign of support. I did what I thought was right. Right or wrong is subjective, Dr. Evans replied coldly. What matters is the bottom line. You've put us in a difficult position, and we cannot allow such behavior to go unpunished. Ethan felt his legs weaken, and he grasped the edge of the table for support. This isn't just about me. It's about the children who need care. You're turning your back on them. With a sharp nod, Dr. Evans waved him off. This meeting is adjourned. Stunned, Ethan stumbled out of the conference room, the reality of his dismissal sinking in with each step. As he walked through the hospital corridors, the whispers of his colleagues followed him like shadows. Some expressed their disbelief, while others averted their gazes, fearing the repercussions of standing up against the administration. Ethan, I can't believe this. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a fellow surgeon and one of his closest friends, caught up with him in the hallway. Her eyes were wide with concern. This is outrageous. You were just trying to help that girl. I know, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it doesn't matter now. They've painted me as a villain for trying to do the right thing. Let me help you, she insisted. We can fight this. You have supporters, people who care about you. Don't give up. Ethan shook his head, a bitter smile creeping onto his lips. It's not that simple, Sarah. I've lost my job, my reputation. I'll be lucky if I find another position in this city. Don't say that. You're one of the best surgeons in this field. There are hospitals out there that would be lucky to have you, she urged, her voice rising with passion. Maybe, Ethan replied, his voice heavy with defeat. But it won't change what happened. I can't go back on my decision, and I won't. I just need to figure out what's next. As he stepped outside into the bustling streets of Chicago, the cool air hit him like a wave, but the chaos around him felt distant. He was lost in thought, reflecting on his career, his values, and the choices that had led him here. The city thrummed with life, yet he felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that no longer welcomed him. Ethan wandered aimlessly, passing familiar landmarks, the coffee shop where he used to grab a quick bite between surgeries, the park where he had taken his daughter to play. Each place held memories that now felt tainted by his abrupt fall from grace. He couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, not just from the hospital, but from a system he had dedicated his life to. Eventually, he found himself sitting on a bench, staring at the ground, lost in thought. What do I do now? He murmured to himself, the weight of the world pressing down on him. Just then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from Lily's mother, Sarah Parsons. Ethan, can we talk? Lily needs you. His heart raced as he read the message. He had been so consumed by his own despair that he had almost forgotten about the little girl who had sparked this entire journey. Without hesitation, he typed a quick response. Yes. Where? As they arranged to meet, Ethan felt a flicker of purpose reignite within him. He might have lost his job, but he hadn't lost his desire to help. He would find a way to continue fighting for those who were voiceless in the healthcare system, starting with Lily. The sun dipped low in the sky as he made his way to the Parsons' modest apartment. The familiar feeling of dread washed over him as he knocked on the door. When Sarah opened it, her face was lined with worry and exhaustion. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling, thank you for coming. Of course, he replied, stepping inside. The air was heavy with uncertainty, and he could see Lily lying on the couch, her small frame weak and frail. "We've been trying to get her the treatment she needs, but..." Sarah's voice broke, and tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to do. We're out of options." Ethan knelt beside Lily, who looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Hey there, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "I'm tired, Dr. Carter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know, but I'm here to help, okay? We'll figure this out together," he reassured her, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He had no resources, no hospital backing him. Yet looking into Lily's eyes, he felt a renewed sense of determination. "Sarah, we need to talk about Lily's condition," he said, turning to her. "I want to help, but we have to be strategic about this." As they discussed potential avenues for treatment, Ethan felt a surge of hope. He might have been stripped of his title, but he still had his knowledge, his skills, and, most importantly, his heart. He would fight for Lily, and in doing so, he would begin to reclaim the man he had always wanted to be. A man who fought for justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since his dismissal, Ethan felt ready to take the steps necessary to carve out a new beginning, one where he could continue to make a difference in the world, no matter how daunting the challenge. Ethan Carter sat at the small, cluttered desk in his cramped apartment, staring at the computer screen. The harsh blue light illuminated his face, casting shadows that mirrored the turmoil inside him. He had spent countless hours searching for job openings, but the results were always the same: rejection letters, unreturned calls, and an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Each email felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound left by his dismissal from St. Mary's Hospital. "Dr. Carter, your application has been reviewed, and we regret to inform you..." He sighed, closing the tab with a heavy heart. It had been weeks since he lost his position, and the thought of returning to the operating room seemed more distant than ever. He had been a respected pediatric surgeon, known for his skill and compassion. Now, he was just another name on a list of disgraced former employees. The phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. He answered it absent-mindedly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hello?" "Ethan, it's Lily's mother, Sarah." His heart raced at the mention of her name. Lily, the little girl whose life he had tried to save, whose heart had been the center of his world for those fleeting moments before everything unraveled. He could hear the desperation in Sarah's voice. "Ethan, I don't know who else to turn to. Lily, her condition is getting worse. The doctors are saying she might not make it much longer without the surgery." His stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I wish I could help." "Please, you have to help us. You're the only one who cares enough to do something. The hospital won't even look at her case anymore now that you're... you know." Ethan clenched his jaw, frustration boiling within him. "I can't just swoop in and perform the surgery, Sarah. I'm not even allowed in the hospital anymore." "Then we'll find another way," Sarah's voice cracked. "I can't lose my daughter, Ethan. She deserves a chance just like every other kid. You know that better than anyone." He paused, weighing the gravity of her words. "What are you suggesting?" Silence hung heavily in the air, but he could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. "We could organize a fundraiser. There are people who care about you. You could rally them to help pay for the surgery." Ethan rubbed his temples, a headache forming as he considered the implications. Organizing a fundraiser was risky. He could draw more attention to himself and his situation. But the thought of Lily's suffering, of her not getting the care she needed, gnawed at him. "Okay," he finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll help. We'll figure this out." "Thank you, Ethan. You're her only hope." As they hung up, Ethan felt a flicker of determination igniting within him. For the first time since his dismissal, he had a purpose. He would do everything in his power to save Lily, and in doing so, perhaps he could reclaim a part of himself that he thought was lost forever. The following days were a blur of activity as Ethan threw himself into planning the fundraiser. He reached out to former colleagues, friends, and even acquaintances from the hospital. Surprisingly, many of them responded positively, eager to help. The community rallied around the cause, united by their shared concern for Lily's well-being and their admiration for Ethan's passion. In one particularly heartwarming conversation, he spoke with Dr. James Mitchell, a fellow surgeon and one of the few who had supported him during the disciplinary hearing. "Ethan, you know I've always respected your work," Dr. Mitchell said. "I can't believe what they did to you. Count me in for the fundraiser. I'll bring some of the surgical staff from St. Mary's. We can even get local businesses to donate food and supplies." "Thank you, James. That means a lot," Ethan replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "Don't mention it. We're all in this together. We can't let the system win." As the date of the fundraiser approached, the energy in the community shifted. Flyers adorned the walls of local coffee shops, and social media buzzed with excitement. Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope that perhaps he could still make a difference. On the day of the event, the local community center buzzed with activity. Tables were set up, adorned with colorful banners and donation jars. The air was thick with the aroma of homemade food and the sound of laughter. Ethan stood at the entrance, his heart racing as he watched people arrive, many of whom he had never met before, but who had come to support Lily. "Ethan, over here!" Sarah called, waving him over. Her face was a mixture of anxiety and hope, and he could see the determination in her eyes. "Is everything ready?" he asked, glancing around at the bustling crowd. "Almost. We have a silent auction set up in the back, and I've started compiling a list of donors. I think we're going to raise a good amount of money today." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie building between them. "Let's hope it's enough." As the day progressed, the community poured in. Friends, former colleagues, and even some strangers came together, united by the cause. Ethan moved through the crowd, sharing Lily's story and encouraging donations. "Thank you for coming," he said to one woman who had just made a generous contribution. "Every dollar counts." "I just wish I could do more," she replied, her voice laced with emotion. "That little girl deserves a fighting chance." Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he listened to the heartfelt stories and encouragement pouring in from everyone. It reminded him why he had become a doctor in the first place, to help those in need. As the evening approached, they gathered for a short speech. Ethan stood in front of the crowd, the warm glow of the lights casting a soft halo around him. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their collective hope resting on his shoulders. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady. "Today, we're not just raising money, we're raising awareness about the struggles that families like Lily's face every day. Every child deserves the chance to live a healthy life." Applause erupted from the crowd, filling him with a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in weeks. "We may face challenges, but together we can overcome them. Together we can show that compassion exists even in a broken system." The energy in the room was palpable, and Ethan felt a surge of optimism. They were making a difference, one small step at a time. As the fundraiser continued, donations poured in, and the atmosphere was electric. Laughter and chatter filled the space, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of belonging. But as the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping in. What if this wasn't enough? What if they raised money, but it still wasn't enough to save Lily? Just as he was lost in thought, a commotion erupted near the back of the room. Ethan turned to see Sarah standing with a group of people, her face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" He rushed over, concern flooding his voice. She's not doing well. The doctors said we have to act fast, or it might be too late." Ethan's heart dropped. Panic surged within him as he realized the urgency of the situation. "We have to get her to the hospital. Where's the ambulance?" "Not yet. We need to secure the funds first," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We need to make sure we have enough for the surgery." He nodded, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was what he had fought for, what he had hoped for. But the looming reality of Lily's deteriorating health cast a shadow over the night's successes. Just as Ethan turned to reassure Sarah, he caught sight of a familiar figure in the crowd. Dr. Margaret Evans, the hospital director who had been responsible for his dismissal. Her presence sent a shiver down his spine. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, her tone icy. "What do you want?" he snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. "I've heard the rumors about your little fundraiser," she said, her lips curling into a smirk. "You're making quite the spectacle of yourself." He clenched his fists, ready to lash out. "I'm trying to save a life. Something you clearly don't understand. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he could see the threat lurking beneath her polished exterior. Be careful, Ethan. You're stepping into dangerous territory. You don't want to make enemies. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. I'm not afraid of you, Margaret. I'm doing what's right. You can't scare me away from that. As she turned to walk away, he felt a surge of determination. No matter what she tried to do, he would not back down. He would fight for Lily, for every child who deserved a chance, no matter the cost. But as the night unfolded and the fundraiser continued, the weight of the world pressed down on him. He had ignited hope in the community, but he knew that the battle was far from over. The real fight was just beginning, and he had no idea what challenges lay ahead. As the final numbers came in, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They had raised enough money for Lily's surgery, but the air in Dr. Ethan Carter's office felt heavy with anticipation as he prepared to confront Dr. Margaret Evans, the hospital's director. This was not just any meeting. It was a showdown over principles, a battle for the soul of healthcare that had been grinding at him since his dismissal. Ethan had spent sleepless nights thinking about how to approach this moment. He gathered evidence, meticulously documenting every instance of malpractice, every instance where profit had been prioritized over patient care. He couldn't let Lily's plight or his own unjust termination go unchallenged. As he strode into Dr. Evans' office, a mixture of determination and anxiety coursed through him. The polished desk gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil that had brought him here. Dr. Evans sat behind it, her expression unreadable. The walls were adorned with accolades, symbols of a career built on success. But to Ethan, they felt more like trophies of a system that had lost its way. Dr. Carter, she said, her voice cool and professional, I didn't expect to see you here again. I didn't expect to be fired for doing what I believed was right, Ethan replied, his voice steady but laced with indignation. You know as well as I do that what I did for Lily was not just necessary, it was humane. Dr. Evans leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her. Humane, yes, but it was also against hospital policy. You put the institution at risk. Risk? Or your partnership with the pharmaceutical company? His words hung in the air, a direct hit. He could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes, quickly masked by her usual composure. I know about the deals you've been making, the financial incentives you've accepted. You're more concerned with profit than saving lives. Watch your tone, Ethan, she warned, but there was a quiver of uncertainty in her voice. You're treading on dangerous ground. I'm not afraid of danger, Margaret. I'm afraid of what this hospital has become under your leadership. Ethan's heart raced, but he pressed on. You've turned a place that was once a sanctuary for healing into a profit-driven machine. Dr. Evans's demeanor shifted slightly. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Ethan thought he could see the cracks in her facade. You think you can waltz back in here, guns blazing, and change anything? This is how the system works. You were naive to think otherwise. Naive? Or maybe you're the one who's lost sight of what it means to be a physician. The intensity of the moment ignited a fire in Ethan. I won't let your choices dictate the future of healthcare. I will expose the truth. Dr. Evans chuckled darkly. Expose the truth? You think anyone will believe you over me? I run this hospital. I have connections that you can't even begin to fathom. You're just a disgraced surgeon with a misguided sense of righteousness. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. Then I'll find someone who will listen. There are journalists out there, people who care about the truth. Good luck with that, she replied dismissively. You'll find that the media is just as corrupt. They'll twist your story to fit their narrative. With those words, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Maybe, but that won't stop me. I refuse to back down. As Ethan left her office, he felt both liberated and burdened. The confrontation had been exhilarating, but it left him with an overwhelming sense of urgency. He needed allies, people who shared his vision of a healthcare system that prioritized patients over profits. A few days later, while researching journalists who had covered healthcare scandals, Ethan stumbled upon Sarah Mitchell, a sharp investigative reporter known for her relentless pursuit of the truth. He drafted an email pouring out his story, his frustrations, and his hopes for change. To his surprise, Sarah responded quickly. They arranged to meet at a quaint cafe in downtown Chicago, a place filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversation. Ethan arrived early, his nerves on edge as he replayed his story in his mind. He needed to convey the urgency of his mission without sounding like a desperate man clinging to a fading dream. When Sarah arrived, she was everything he had hoped for: sharp, focused, and exuding a quiet confidence. They exchanged pleasantries before diving into the heart of the matter. "Tell me everything," she urged, her pen poised over her notepad. Ethan took a deep breath, recounting his journey from a celebrated pediatric surgeon to the pariah of St. Mary's Hospital. He spoke of Lily, of the corrupt practices he had witnessed, and of Dr. Evans' financial ties. Each word ignited a fire inside him, and he could see Sarah's interest peaking. "This is serious," she said, her brow furrowing in concentration. "If what you're saying is true, it could be an explosive story." "I know it is," Ethan replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "But I can't do this alone. I need your help to expose the corruption." Sarah nodded, her expression contemplative. "I've been investigating unethical practices in the healthcare system for a while now, but your story adds a personal touch that could resonate with the public." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. "Together, we can shine a light on what's really happening. Too many families are suffering because of a system that's broken." As they delved deeper into the details, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie building. Sarah was not just a journalist. She was passionate about making a difference, just like him. They exchanged ideas, brainstormed angles for the story, and laid out a plan to gather evidence. "We'll need documentation, interviews, anything that can substantiate your claims," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "I can reach out to some of your former colleagues. If they're willing to talk, it could strengthen our case." "Some may be too afraid," Ethan warned, remembering the silence that had enveloped the hospital after his firing. "But there are a few I trust. If we can get to them, I believe they'll share their experiences." "Then we start there," Sarah replied decisively. "This could be the beginning of something significant." As they continued their discussion, Ethan felt an unfamiliar sensation of hope blossoming within him. For the first time since his dismissal, he felt empowered, no longer a victim of circumstance, but a man on a mission. The fight for justice was just beginning, and with Sarah by his side, he sensed that they could truly make an impact. Meanwhile, as they gathered evidence and testimonies, a darker reality began to unfold. Each interview peeled back layers of deception, revealing a web of complicity among various hospital administrators and physicians. Many had turned a blind eye to patient needs, prioritizing bonuses and financial incentives instead. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. These were people he had once considered colleagues, allies in the fight for better healthcare. But now they seemed more like pawns in a game where lives were treated as dollar signs. As he and Sarah pressed on, the weight of their findings grew heavier. Each piece of evidence painted a grim picture of a healthcare system in disarray, one that had lost its moral compass in the pursuit of profit. "Ethan, this is bigger than we thought," Sarah said, her voice tinged with concern as they reviewed their findings. "We're not just dealing with one corrupt individual. This is systemic." "I know," Ethan replied, the gravity of the situation settling in. "But we can't back down. This is for Lily and all the children who are suffering because of this greed." As they prepared to take the next steps in their investigation, Ethan felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them head-on. He had made a commitment to himself, to Lily, and to every patient who had been failed by the system. No matter what it took, he would fight for justice and the chance to reclaim the principles that had once guided his life as a physician. With each piece of evidence they uncovered, the stakes became higher and the risks more significant. But for Ethan, the fight was no longer just about proving his innocence. It was about igniting a change that the healthcare system desperately needed. The battle for truth had begun, and he was ready to lead the charge. Ethan Carter stood in front of the mirror, the reflection staring back at him, a stark reminder of the tumultuous journey he had embarked upon. The once proud surgeon, revered for his skill and compassion, now felt like a stranger in his own skin. The media frenzy surrounding his dismissal had turned him into a controversial figure, a symbol of defiance against a corrupt healthcare system. Yet as the weight of public expectation pressed upon him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight for justice was beginning to take its toll on his personal life. In the living room, Claire sat on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sweater. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, each of them wrestling with their own fears. Ethan could sense the unease radiating from her, a palpable worry that shadowed their home. The couple had always been a team, navigating life's challenges together, but now the strain of his public battle threatened to unravel the very fabric of their relationship. "Ethan," Claire finally broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk." He turned from the mirror, the urgency in her tone drawing him in. "I know things have been chaotic, but we're making a difference, Claire. People are starting to listen." Her expression shifted, a mixture of concern and frustration. "That's just it. You're out there fighting for justice. But what about us? What about our family? Every day there's another headline, another rally, and I'm left here wondering how we're going to pay the bills." He took a step closer, leaning against the wall, his heart heavy. "I understand, but this isn't just about me. It's about Lily and all the other children who are suffering. If I can bring about change, then it's worth it." Claire's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and sadness. "And what about our children? They need their father too. You're not the only one affected by this mess. I'm scared, Ethan. What if this fight consumes you? What if it puts us in danger?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. He had always prided himself on being there for his family, but now, caught in the whirlwind of activism and media scrutiny, he felt like he was losing sight of what mattered most. "I promise I'll do better, Claire. I'll find a way to balance this. I just need you to trust me." "Trust is hard when you're never home," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm worried about you, Ethan. You're pushing yourself too hard. You're not invincible." He stepped forward, grasping her hands in his. "I know I've been distant. I'm trying to fix things for all of us, but I can't turn my back on this fight. Not now. It's too important." Claire looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just want you to be safe. I want you to come home every night, not just physically, but mentally too. You need to take care of yourself." Ethan felt the weight of her fears pressing down on him. He had always been the protector, the one who fought for others, but now he found himself at a crossroads. How could he continue to champion the cause he believed in while also safeguarding the family he loved? "I'll try to be more present," he promised, determination lacing his voice. "But I can't walk away from this fight. I need your support, Claire. We're in this together, right?" She nodded slowly, her expression softening. "I'll support you, but you need to promise me that you won't lose yourself in this. You're more than just a doctor or an activist. You're my husband and a father." As the night wore on, Ethan and Claire began to share their fears and hopes, bridging the gap that had widened between them. They talked about Lily, about the future, and the uncertainty that loomed like a dark cloud over their lives. In that moment, they forged a fragile truce, each vowing to be more understanding of the other's struggles. Later that evening, Ethan found himself sitting at the edge of his bed, his mind racing with the implications of their conversation. He picked up his phone, scrolling through the countless messages of support and encouragement from the community. Each notification reminded him of the lives he was trying to touch, the injustices he was trying to combat. But the weight of his family's concerns hung heavily on him. Just then, the phone vibrated with an incoming call. It was Sarah, the journalist who had been his ally in uncovering the hospital's corruption. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was ready to dive back into the fray. But the urgency in her voice when she had called earlier compelled him to answer. "Ethan?" Sarah's voice crackled through the line, filled with an energy that both excited and unnerved him. "I have something important to discuss. Can you meet me at the cafe down the street?" "Sure. What's going on?" he asked, curiosity piqued. "It's about Dr. Evans. I've found some leads that could expose more than just her involvement in your dismissal. There's a bigger story here, one that could change everything." Ethan's heart raced. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. As he made his way to the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was escalating. But the thought of Claire's worried face lingered in his mind, urging him to tread carefully. He was walking a tightrope, balancing the call for justice with the needs of his family. When he arrived at the cafe, Sarah was already seated at a corner table, her brow furrowed as she scanned the room. The moment their eyes met, she gestured for him to join her. "Ethan," she began, her voice low and urgent. "I've been digging deeper into the hospital's financial records. What I've found is alarming. Dr. Evans is involved in a network of kickbacks that extends beyond just your case. If we can expose this, it could bring her down and hold the hospital accountable for its actions." Ethan leaned in, intrigued but cautious. "What do you have?" Sarah pulled out a folder filled with documents, her fingers trembling slightly as she pointed to the highlighted sections. These transactions show that several doctors have been receiving incentives for referring patients for unnecessary procedures. It's a massive scheme, and it's all tied back to a big pharmaceutical company. His mind raced. If this is true, it could change everything. But we need solid evidence. We can't just rely on speculation. "I know," Sarah replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "I'm working on getting the documents verified. But we need to be careful. There are people who won't want this to come to light." Ethan nodded, the gravity of their conversation weighing heavily on him. "I understand the risks, but if we can expose this corruption, it will not only vindicate me, but also help countless others who have suffered because of the hospital's greed." The two continued to strategize, their conversation filled with urgency and determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within him. He was ready to fight, not just for his own redemption, but for the future of countless children like Lily. Yet amidst the fervor of the plan unfolding around him, a quiet voice in the back of his mind reminded him of the promises he had made to Claire. He could feel the weight of their conversation lingering, a reminder that he had to navigate this battle with care. The fight for justice was important, but so was the fight for his family. Balancing both would be his greatest challenge yet. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the park where Ethan had organized the public rally. He stood at the makeshift podium, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The crowd had gathered, a sea of faces that reflected hope, anger, and determination. It was a diverse assembly, families, former colleagues, and activists, all united by a common purpose: to demand accountability from St. Mary's Hospital and its administration. Ethan could feel the energy in the air. It was as if the very atmosphere crackled with anticipation. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his voice steady yet passionate. "Today, we stand together to fight for the rights of every child who deserves medical care, regardless of their family's financial situation. We can no longer let profit dictate the value of a human life." Applause erupted, echoing his sentiments. Among the crowd, he spotted familiar faces, his supportive colleagues, community members who had rallied around him, and even a few strangers who had heard the story of his plight. It felt surreal, yet invigorating, to have so many people behind him. As he continued his speech, detailing the systemic corruption he had uncovered, he noticed a figure pushing through the crowd, a woman with a familiar face. It was Lily's mother, Sarah. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. He was aware of the burden she carried, and he hoped that she was here to support him, not to share more devastating news about her daughter's health. "Sarah!" he called out, trying to catch her eye as she drew closer. "I'm glad you made it." But Sarah's expression was grave. She didn't respond to his greeting, her eyes darting around as if searching for something, or someone. She eventually reached the front of the crowd, her breathing uneven, and Ethan's heart sank as he noticed the tension in her posture. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "I need to speak. It's urgent." The crowd quieted, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Ethan stepped down from the podium, concerned. "What's wrong?" "I have something to say about Dr. Evans," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something you need to hear." Ethan's mind raced. He had already uncovered so much about the hospital's corruption, but what more could there be? The air buzzed with curiosity as the crowd leaned in closer, eager to hear her words. "I've been holding back, but I can't anymore," Sarah continued, her hands shaking. Dr. Evans has been involved in illegal activities, kickbacks, blackmailing doctors. She's been profiting off of surgeries, forcing them to comply with her demands or risk losing their jobs. Gasps spread through the crowd. Ethan's heart raced. This was explosive information, and if true, it could change everything. "How do you know this?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. "My husband worked in the billing department," Sarah explained, her eyes glistening with tears. "He overheard conversations, saw documents. That shouldn't have existed. He tried to do the right thing and report it, but..." "But?" Ethan pressed, sensing the weight of her words. "He was fired. They threatened him. I didn't want to believe it, but when Lily's health deteriorated, I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. I have proof." She pulled a folder from her bag, filled with papers and documents. "I know it's dangerous, but I have to stand up for my daughter and all the other children." Ethan felt a surge of hope. "This could turn the tide, Sarah. If we can present this evidence, we can expose Dr. Evans and the entire corrupt system." Just as Ethan reached for the folder, Sarah suddenly swayed, her face paling. "Sarah!" he shouted, panic gripping him. The crowd erupted in chaos as she collapsed to the ground. "Someone call an ambulance!" Ethan yelled, rushing to her side. Kneeling, he took her hand, feeling its clamminess. "Sarah, stay with me. What's happening?" I don't know," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "Lily? She's not well. They say she might not make it." Ethan's heart dropped. "What do you mean? What's wrong with her?" "She has a rare genetic disorder," Sarah managed to choke out before her eyes fluttered closed. "We thought it was just her heart condition, but it's more complicated. I didn't want to believe it, but..." The crowd had formed a circle around them, murmurs of concern rippling through the onlookers. People were pulling out their phones, some recording, while others seemed frozen in shock. Ethan felt a wave of dread wash over him. He had fought so hard for justice, for Lily's life, but now the very foundation of his battle was crumbling. "Get her some water," someone shouted, but Ethan knew they needed more than that. He turned to the crowd, his voice shaky. "Please, we need to clear space. Make way for the paramedics." As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Ethan's thoughts raced. How could he focus on the rally now, on the fight for justice, when Lily's life hung in the balance? He glanced back at Sarah, her body still on the ground, and felt a pang of guilt. He had been so consumed with exposing the corruption at St. Mary's that he hadn't fully grasped the urgency of Lily's situation. "Ethan, what should we do?" A former colleague, Dr. Reynolds, asked, stepping forward with concern etched on his face. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "We need to make sure Sarah gets the help she needs, and we need to get Lily to a hospital. Now." Before he could say more, the paramedics arrived, pushing through the crowd. Ethan stood aside, watching as they assessed Sarah's condition. He felt a mix of dread and urgency, knowing that the clock was ticking for both mother and daughter. As they loaded Sarah onto a stretcher, Ethan turned back to the crowd. "I know this is chaotic, but we cannot let this moment go to waste. Sarah has brought to light something we all need to know about Dr. Evans and the hospital. We need to rally together, not just for ourselves, but for all the children like Lily who are caught in this broken system." He saw faces nodding in agreement, the fire of determination rekindling within the crowd. The rally wasn't over. It had transformed into something deeper, a fight for justice that was more dire than he had ever anticipated. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan stepped back to the podium, ready to address the crowd once more. "Today, we stand not just for accountability, but for the lives that hang in the balance. We will not be silenced, and we will not back down. Together, we will fight for Lily and every child who deserves a chance at life." As he spoke, Ethan felt the weight of his mission settle over him like a cloak, a heavy but necessary burden. The rally had morphed into something both urgent and vital, and he knew that the fight was just beginning. The truth was out there, and with it, the hope for a better future for all children caught in the web of a corrupt system. But as he looked out at the crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined.